Hello and welcome to the PCR training video. Before starting a PCR, you'll want to find your genotyping protocol, which lists your gene-specific primers and the thermocycler conditions. In a nice bucket, you'll need your genomic DNA, your PCR master mix, ours is green because it has loading dye in it, your forward and reverse primer stocks at 100 micromolar, and then a tube to dilute these primers to a concentration of 10 micromolar. You'll also need some water and should only work with nuclease-free water. To avoid contamination, you'll never want to stick your pipette into a shared stock bottle, so instead make yourself an aliquot into a 15 ml conical tube that you can use. You'll want to quickly spin down your tubes to get any liquid out of the lids. To dilute our primer stocks to a concentration of 10 micromolar, we'll need to do a 1 to 10 dilution by adding 80 microliters of nuclease-free water to our tube. Then we'll add 10 microliters of each of the primers. Add it directly to the tube and pipette up and down a couple of times, and you'll want to press your pipette tip past the first stop to expel all liquid. You should see nothing left in your tip. The items you've used to the back of the bucket so that you can reduce any confusion in case you get distracted. We'll then add 10 microliters of the second primer and again pipette up and down a couple of times to mix and expel all liquid by pushing past the first stop on your pipette. Next, you'll want to mix the solution by pipetting it up and down. One rule of thumb I follow when mixing solutions is to set your pipette to at least half the volume to mix, and this makes sure that your solution is homogeneous. Next, we'll add our primers to the PCR master mix. Each PCR reaction will need 1 microliter of this mix, so you'll need to scale the volume of each reagent according to the number of samples you have. This tube has enough for 54 reactions, so I'm adding 54 microliters of the primer mix. So next we'll need to add the GoTac, the enzyme that makes the reaction work. It's stored in the -20 freezer, and because enzymes are really sensitive to temperature, you'll want to carry it over in one of these carriers. For every reaction, you'll need to add 0.1 microliters of GoTac. So again, I'm making enough for 54 samples, so I'm going to add 5.4 microliters. And you'll see that I'm holding the tube from the top so as not to warm up the enzyme with my body heat. This enzyme is rather viscous, so you'll want to leave your pipette tip in the liquid for a couple seconds. Add the enzyme directly to the master mix and pipette up and down a couple times, then push past the first stop to expel all liquids. Next, you'll want to mix everything. Again, I set my pipette to at least half volume, pipette up and down several times to mix, keeping my fingers near the top of the tube to not warm things up. Next, we will add the mix to our PCR tubes. One thing I do for accuracy and to reduce bubbles is to push past the first stop on the pipette in the liquid. You'll see that when you pipette down to the first stop, there'll still be some liquid in the tip. Now, only do this if you're adding liquid to an empty tube and never if you're going to be mixing. Add the liquid to the side of the PCR tubes. This will keep any droplets from collecting at the tip of the pipette and make sure that you get all the liquid into the tube. Now, for a PCR reaction, we add 18 microliters of this mix, and for demo purposes, I'm only going to do 8 samples. Next, we add DNA. We have a multi-channel pipette that makes this step much easier and faster. And so we'll add 2 microliters of DNA to the tubes with the mix and pipette up and down several times to mix. Next, we'll put the lids on the tubes, making sure they snap on securely. We'll give them a very quick spin using either the large or benchtop centrifuges. If you use a large centrifuge, you'll want to put something in it so that the tubes can sit in, and be sure to add a counterbalance. And quickly spin for a couple of seconds. Open the thermocycler using the handles on top. Place your tubes in and then close it. Navigate to your specific PCR program and then hit start. Depending on your conditions, this will take 1 to 2 hours to run. When you're done, it's always good to clean up and put things away. To protect my pipettes and make sure that they stay as accurate as possible for as long as possible, I always return each pipette back to its maximum setting to relax the springs. And that's running a PCR. Thanks for watching.